Hello everybody, welcome back to the Tokyo FinTech podcast. Today I'm here with Johan and Gustaf from Sweden, and they are the podcasters of Fintechpodden. Hello guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So Sweden is exciting, always an exciting topic for Japanese, and the first thing that comes to mind is the high ratio of cashless payments. Can you talk a bit about that journey and what it means for your daily lives, really?
I would say today, Sweden is on the road to become a really cashless society. We do have physical cash. We have just recently, for a couple of years ago, updated it. So we have a pretty new and modern physical cash. But I would say in general, people do not use it. I haven't used physical cash, I think, for 2 to 3 years, maybe. I think I have one physical cash note at home that I got from my grandparents at a birthday for several years ago. That's the only one. So yeah, we are really on the road of being cashless. We have also adopted mobile payment solutions in different ways. But with mobile payments, we usually mean like Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and so on. That could be a short introduction. Do you have anything to add, Gustav?
Well, I guess we can talk about Swish a little bit. It's the app that everyone uses in Sweden for payments or for sending money, mostly between each other to friends and family and so on. It has, for some reasons, not become that used as a payment app yet. It's kind of hard to use it because you need to type in your phone number and so on. But it's getting better and better. And then I see that the future now is that people are going to use it more and more when they buy things in stores and so on.
You pay a monthly fee to your bank, and as part of that, you get unlimited transfers on Swish?
They were planned when they introduced Swish for many years ago now. There was some plan of having some type of fee connected to this. But then because they launched it and nobody used it then, they kind of cancel all the fees. So all the bank, they have price list where it says this is how much it should be costing, like 1 SEK per transaction and so on. But no bank has actually implemented it. In the young age, it's 97% usage of this payment app. So all persons are using it. So now the banks, they can't implement the fees on it because we are so used of having it for free. But what they have done is that they have implemented fees on the corporate transactions, or like when you pay for something in a store. For the beginning, it was just peer-to-peer, like people to people. But now you can also, as Gustav said, pay with it when you buy ice cream, for example. And then the banks take some transactions fee from the store.
What does that mean for your ATM network? I find it quite interesting during the pandemic. I think last week there was an article talking about the ATM network in the UK and maybe London specifically, which was already going down in terms of utilization. But now with the pandemic, nobody wanted to hit the ATM button. Everybody tried to live without cash, to the extent that the fees that they accrued were not sufficient if this continues to sustain the operating cost of the network. So by comparison, there can't be many ATMs, or how do you actually get to your cash when you need it?
All the ATMs are still there, but there's less people using them. I think it was last year, the regulators of the government had to come out and say that, okay, we need to do something to keep the cash in the society. The old people have something to pay with. So I think that they will still be there for a while, maybe 10 years or something like that. The usage of them are declining, but we still have groups in the society that are not that used to mobiles and sort of new types of payments.
Maybe what is special in Sweden and maybe some other European areas as well, all the banks kind of have been collaborating on creating an ATM network that are run by a separate company. So no banks in Sweden have their own ATMs anymore. So they just have this collaboration of ATM networks, which make it cost efficient when you have this type of low volumes as we have in Sweden and many other Nordic countries. It is a growing problem that they are canceling the ATMs here as well. But we also have some innovation in this area. For example, in the largest retail chains, food retail chains, you can take out money in the cashier while you're paying for your food. So there are those kind of solutions that, as Gustav said, like the government are looking into how we can still keep the cash in the society, even if actually nobody wants it.
They also made it possible recently to cash out other currencies, so euro, dollar, etc. Now, since COVID, I don't think many have used that because we're not going on vacation that much.
So it was intended if you travel, then you can take US dollar or something else.
Yeah, exactly. Just walking around on the street in Stockholm, let's say, and you want to take out some dollars because you're going to the US, and you can do that.
So let's talk about fintech more broadly. With your podcast, you're covering Sweden in particular, but also the Nordics broadly. What are the major trends that you're seeing?
Some of the major trends are open banking, of course. We have had a couple of different guests talking about that, which is really interesting. Another trend is that more and more actors and people within banking and fintech are actually trying to do something for the end user, the user experience. And that is something that I think is really, really important and interesting. Then another trend on top of that user experience is doing banking for social good. That means that you actually do implement and use technology in a way that may help the end user or the customer to improve its financial situation or to look over its impact on the environment, for example, on how you invest your money and so on. So that's a really interesting trend that we see now, that more and more fintechs focus on that because of the demand from the end users. What do you say, Johan? Do you come to think about some more trends?
Totally agree with all the things you said, and maybe connecting to open banking. We see now of the PSD2 implementations, we now see how this type of regulatory thinking could be implemented in industries that are close by the banking. So maybe we will see something similar within the pension or insurance side as well. So there is happening a lot of things within those connected areas as well, but it's driven by the small players and the innovative thinking and so on, and not by the regulators in those areas at the moment. So we see some type of players that are doing the philosophy of open banking and PSD2 and take it into other areas, such as insurance, for example. We see a lot of players investigating how they can use this type of aggregation of the insurance products and see so the customer can get a 360 overview of their insurances, for example. So we see a lot of innovation happening in the surrounded areas as well.
To add on that, like in Sweden, we have a bank called Avanza Bank and also Nordnet. It's more like for retail investors to invest in stocks and funds. But they have been out for a couple of years now to try to make it easier for people to move their pension funds and to make it an open market for that, so that you can as freely as if it were your cash account, you could move your pension to wherever you want to have it. When it becomes really easy to move your whatever it is, if it's your pension fund or if it's your just changing bank, then it puts a lot of pressure on each player to actually do the hard work and create the user-friendly application and everything about that, instead of having it on the opposite way where everyone tries to lock in their customers and make it as hard as possible to change for a pension or change your main bank account and so on.
Have you seen any of the banks reacting to open banking? We have through PSD2 regulation that minimum information becomes available, but the banks would be open to have premium services on top that they then can charge for. Have you seen banks being creative and come up with new products that they offer that weren't there before, that then opens up new revenue stream for the incumbents?
We have seen some movements by the large bank here in the Nordics. When it comes to premium APIs, it has mostly been within the corporate side. It could be like API connections to bookkeeping providers, for example. So corporate customers can connect their bank accounts directly to the bookkeeping software. And there's some fees involved in those transactions. Also for when you have different FX accounts, for example, there's premium APIs for doing automatic FX transactions and so on. So we see some, but not for the private customers in that broad extent. I think most of the innovation there is within the smaller players, such as Tink, for example, is a big Swedish fintech that are working within this open banking infrastructure.
I think we will see a lot of those types of innovations the coming years. I mean, many banks might work with a third party to enable this, but it takes time to work and develop those solutions together with third parties and to bring it out to the market and everything. But I definitely see that happening.
From your perspective, in terms of the maturity of the open banking APIs, in the initial stage, of course, there is a definition of it, but there's still lots of interpretation, and one bank's API was different in terms of the syntax from another one. Has that been sorted out, and there's either a common understanding or people have developed a language and some common models that make it more homogeneous, let's say?
It's still a big problem, I think. In general, I would say like the Nordic region has pretty high availability on the APIs, and they follow kind of the general schemes. Like we have the Berlin standard, for example, and some others in Europe. One main problem in Sweden or in Nordic is that maybe we have several different service providers. In some other regions, we have like one or two large service providers that cater all the banks in those regions. But in the Nordics, many of the banks are doing it by themselves, or some smaller banks are doing it together with a service provider and so on. That also make it a lot of room for different interpretation of the standards and so on. In general, the Nordic banks have an open dialogue with the fintech community, and they are very keen on keeping a good relationship. We also see a lot of large players owning stakes in the smaller fintech players, especially within the open banking area, in the open banking infrastructure area. So I think it's in both sides' interest on collaboration within this area. So it could be better, but it could also be a lot worse.
So Gustav, your second point you mentioned was the user experience and the end user overall. Can you give some examples of what you were thinking about in that domain?
When someone uses a bank, a new fintech or so, I think that the fintechs are really good at creating solutions that can automatically help give advice. In Sweden, we have many challenger banks coming up right now. One example could be PFC, and it's a bit into the future right now where we actually see the fully automated and helpful services with, for example, how long does my money last? Those kind of solutions, I think, will be really great for the end users. Both banks and fintechs will have them soon as a hygiene factor.
We hear this a lot talking to as many people as you do as well, that financial literacy is still really a problem, even in the developed economies. So people don't necessarily understand what to do with the money, and they don't know, as you said, will my money last until the end of the month? If I have something left over, how do I best invest it? What's the landscape like in Sweden or Nordics overall? Do people typically invest in the stock market?
Don't really know the numbers exactly, but I think thanks to that we have had a pretty high level of innovation in this area and that have made it really, really easy to invest. Then Sweden is far ahead from many other countries in the world when it comes to putting your money into work in investments and funds. I've actually seen that some companies that wants to do an IPO, they go to Sweden to do the IPO because we have so many retail investors. So they rather choose Sweden than any other country in the Nordics because we have so much money to invest. So it means that it can become a better IPO for them. We are really doing great when it comes to investing.
And then the third one was the banking for social good. Different shapes and forms that it can take. Is that a generational thing, this more the younger generation, or do you see this acceptance across the board?
It's a trend that grows in the world, and I think the younger generation is fastest to adopt it. One example, what I mentioned before, is the investments and how your investments impact the environment. I heard a startup pitching in this area, and they said, well, where you put your money is actually the most effective way to actually improve how you impact the environment. So it's like 10 times more effective to put your money in the right place rather than choosing what to buy. That's something that I think the younger generations are faster to adopt, once the older generations might live in the old world where that's okay to invest in anything that might impact the environment.
We see a lot of things happening here. So see, for example, in the credit area, me and Gustav just had an interview with a Swedish fintech called Anyfin, and their whole idea is to just refinancing existing credits. So for example, if you become stuck in a credit debt, for example, you can use the Anyfin service to lower your already existing credits. So they're only targeting existing credits, and one of their big mission is to just lower the interest rate of all the credit customers in the different markets they are active. And I think in general, they said they lower the interest rate with 56% of the customers that use this service. So for example, if you have bought something with your American Express and so on, and you start to use the credit facility, then you can afterwards just use this Anyfin service to lower your interest rate. And it also works on this type of part payment schemes. Klarna, for for example. It's a very used service in Europe and US where you can part pay your online shopping, for example. And that is also interest rate connected. And then this Anyfin service can be used for that as well. They just got a really large investment. So I think the investors are also keen on going into this area where there's some social good connected to a really working business model as well. So it's two factors are on a place here.
In this case, how do they finance themselves? Do they have access to cheaper money, or are they using the investments they got?
It's both. I think they get the same type of money on the market. So right now, when this interest environment, it's quite low. So they have access to cheap money, but that other players also have. But I think as well, they are really trying to have the newest technology stack, use AI for better credit scoring and so on. So I think it's a combination of a smart way of getting money cheap to them, but also use the latest technology and maybe use the technology in other ways that are the existing players are not using.
To add on that, I think one interesting takeaway from that interview that we had with Anyfin was that you can use technology to make it as easy to get into debt and to take more debt, but you can also use technology to get the end user understand why it's not maybe a good thing to become in debt with such a high interest rate, and you can make them lower their interest rate and lower their amount of debt and so on. So you can it's a double-edged sword, which you can really choose how you use it.
Yeah, and that's a bit the moral problem I personally have with Klarna, because it removes friction to the extent that it entices people to buy things they can't afford. And you have probably 95% of the startups in fintech focused on removing friction. And there's a small part of folks who actually want to reintroduce friction to protect against these scenarios.
We see some movements even from the government and the regulators, especially here in Sweden, where it has maybe become too smooth to do online shopping and so on. So now we will have some regulations that actually says that part payment are not supposed to be the first choice when you do online shopping. It must be direct debit, because so many people are getting stuck in this type of trap. So now even the government and regulators are looking into this, and it has been a really large issue in the Swedish news and so on. There's a lot of discussion on how to help people avoid this type of traps.
So some intervention that happens. In Sweden, you didn't have a full lockdown, unlike almost the rest of Europe. Are there government support programs still that provide liquidity or low-interest loans to support the businesses that still have been impacted? And then did any of the startups play a role in distributing those funds?
There are some schemes to help companies, mostly to help with salaries and so on, and make people not lose their jobs. When it comes to distributing credits, we have not seen that type of movement here in this region as we have seen in the UK, for example, I think, and the US. Here it has mostly been distributed by the large banks only.
Yeah, and it has gone to companies that have been profitable for 3 years or something like that. So that's a requirement to actually get that money from the bank.
Beyond Klarna, what's the next biggest fintech in Sweden or in the Nordics overall?
The most interesting, we would say, is Tink, this type of open banking infrastructure player. They started out as consumer-facing applications where you, even before PSD2, you could aggregate all your banking data in one single interface and get this type of economic profile of yourself and all your different accounts on different banks. But then after a couple of years, they moved into B2B business models, selling this type of services to the banks. They sold first PSD2, but now they sell a lot more type of aggregation services. And I would say that they are market leading in the European area when it comes to this type of add-on services beyond PSD2. For example, in Sweden, they provide a lot of different services that they are selling to the large banks. For example, they have investment aggregation, so you can collect all your investment from different banks into one single interface at one bank, for example. The same comes to mortgages, for example. So you could see your mortgages you have on another bank, a new bank get that information, and then that bank can challenge your current interest rate because they have all the information and the credit scoring and so on. So we see a lot of movement in that area, and they are also partnering with the leading Nordic banks. So for example, Nordea will implement all these services that I told you about and a lot more now in the coming fall. So we see they have really close connections with the leading Nordic banks.
If we should add some other players, I think some interesting ones are Dreams. It's an app created with a collaboration with a bank called Ålandsbanken, where a user gets to save money seamlessly, like without really knowing. You set up a goal and then the app handles the savings for you. So you will reach the goal by a certain date and it will sort of steal some money from your account every now and then. Yeah, so that's one. And then as we mentioned before, Anything is also a really interesting player. And we have peer-to-peer lending, Lendify, and many growing companies in that area as well. I think Lendify was the first one, but then we have a group of like 4, 5, 6 new peer-to-peer lenders that have started recently and grown.
Especially on peer-to-peer lending, if they just started recently, they may be okay. But do you expect some distress in that sector because of non-performing loans through the crisis?
It's hard to say. I'm a customer. I use those services myself because I think it's interesting to see it and so on. And I try to look into my portfolio of, I think I have 100 loans that I've lent out to other people. And still, it's not the change. But I guess we have to wait and see what comes after the summer and going on to the winter and so on, when maybe people really get to face the hard truth with losing an income and so on. I have not taken out any victory on this yet. In my portfolio, I think there's, of course, higher risks now, but I'm still a bit optimistic for peer-to-peer lending.
What's the average interest rate that you realize on your loan portfolio?
It's like 5.9% or something like that. And then the middleman or the peer-to-peer lender takes a cut of something like 2-4%. So I think that the average percent on the actual loan for the one that lends the money is around 9% or something like that.
I want to come back also to what you said earlier on extending open banking to other sectors, because the only other market I know of where that's done is Australia, where it's the Consumer Data Rights, CDR, which starts with banking, but is essentially set up to open up telecoms, insurance, etc. as well. So if that's starting as well, together with what you also said about the transparency of the information, the mortgages, right, that you can almost create a marketplace that institutions can bid for these services, then that becomes a very dynamic financial marketplace.
To see like the smaller players that start to use these services firsthand. SBAB is the one bank in Sweden that only do mortgages, and they have implemented this service from Tink where you can import your current mortgage information, and then the bank can see like if they can challenge the interest rate or not. According to themselves, 8 out of 10 users that use this service will get a lower interest rate. So that is kind of amazing, like because in Sweden the mortgage area is one of those like not very automatic, and the banks keep it a bit secret because they know that the end customer don't to maybe challenge it in a large way, and they want you to meet them face to face at the office so they can like sit down with you and make this large process about it. But actually you can do everything online, and use of this type of service, it's really easy, and it just showcased that a lot of customers are currently overpaying a lot when if they can just use this app, for example, and they can 8 out of 10 would get a lower interest rate.
We haven't talked much about insurance. Any interesting trends you see in InsurTech?
Taking the philosophy from open banking and PSD2, we now see, at least in Sweden, a couple of different players. We have one that is called Insurely that use this type of aggregation of your current existing insurance, and you get it in a consumer-facing app, or they also sell it to other insurance company to use it in their onboarding and so on. So we have some challenger within the insurance space that have implemented these services. So while you're onboarding to those new services as a new customer to those, you can get the choice of importing your existing insurances into this, and then the new player can match or not match what you already have. And probably they have a lower price because they are the challenger at the moment, but they can also help you to see if you're lacking some areas. For example, you maybe not have the right child insurance, and then they can help you add that to your current insurance portfolio. We will see a lot of movement in this area, and already some of the smaller existing incumbents have adopted this technology as well. But it's not as regulated as the PSD2 area. So it's a lot of happening with the help of reverse engineering. And that is also like those type of mortgage services we talked about before. Those is also done by reverse engineering. So it's not regulated, but the regulators, they are letting it happening in the market because they see the value for the end customer. And since we have a pretty wild adoption of digital IDs, electronic IDs, it's safe to use this type of reverse engineering as well.
Can you elaborate on that electronic ID part?
In the most of the Nordic countries, we have local schemes. So in Sweden, we have one called BankID. It's actually created by the leading Swedish retail banks. Did a collaboration on this for a couple of years ago. And now it's kind of the only electronic ID you use in Sweden. So if you're a bank customer at one of those large banks, what it's kind of all the Swedish customers are customer at one of those, you can get this type of mobile bank ID. So you can download an application to your cell phone, and then you can use this to log into all type of services in Sweden. You can use it to log into your insurance company, your bank, your tax. And so it's very adopted, like all type of industries have adopted this standard. So it's really easy for Swedish customers to use this to log into everything. Even when you do online purchases, you can log into your profile at online shopper with this type of ID. So it's used for everything when you do online identity in the Swedish market.
When we talked about the insurance, we recently had a startup in the pod called InsureGuide or Vedevia. What they do is that they actually try to compare insurances down to the smallest detail on price and what the insurance actually covers. It makes it easier for the end user to understand what insurance they should have on hard values, not just the soft values that you may talk to a customer service agent and they say, oh, we have a better one because this. Now you actually get to compare it with this service. And they do it B2B and B2C. So they have a service for bigger insurance institutions to help their employees, to help their customers to compare insurances.
All right. Final topic we need to cover is blockchain, cryptocurrency, central bank digital currencies, right? The Swedish Riksbank was also doing a proof of concept experiment or so, which of course feels the natural extension of what's all happening with cashless. What's the state of that?
Last year, Accenture won a 1-year proof of concept with the Swedish central bank, or Riksbanken. And I think we will see something coming out this autumn. It will be like a proof of concept of how a central bank digital currency could work. What's been said is that it's going to go on for a couple of years now, maybe until 2026, 27 or something like that, where the Riksbank will invite different actors to work with and to create proof of concepts and to iterate until they have a working e-krona in the way that they wish. I mean, they have said that they want to make it possible to do offline payments and that it shouldn't harm the banks too much and for financial stability reasons and so on. It's an experiment that they carefully working to make possible the coming years. But I think it's really interesting to see that a country as ours, Sweden, has come so far when it comes to cashless society. And we're also very far in the area of creating a digital currency. I don't know how much actual difference it will be for the end user in the end. It will be an infrastructure that changes. But then you can, of course, go really deep into those discussions and talk about inflation and deflation and how easily the government and the Riksbank can control this. And I guess that it's much easier when if everything is digital and so on. But we almost have that already. Most of the money in Sweden are digital.
All right. Good to talk to you again. This was fun. Thank you very much.
Thank
you too. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.